everyone, this is Jeannie from Makers Unify. Today I'm going to show you 5 DIY gift giving ideas using articles from the Salvation Army and things that you might have around the house. This first project is a jewelry box that I picked up at Salvation Army. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the hinges so that I can get it ready to paint. Before I paint, I'm going to go ahead and sand this down a little bit to get some of the gloss off of it so that the paint will adhere better. So after I vacuum all the dust, I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down and tape off the areas that I don't want to get paint on. And the paint I am using is the Valspar cabinet furniture paint in salty dog color. I used this on another project, so I thought I would use it here. Actually, I probably could have gotten away with not sanding down. With this furniture paint, you're supposed to be able to paint right over it without sanding it, but I wanted to sand it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of coats. I'm going to dry it in between coats with the hairdryer because I'm impatient. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the IOD transfer wander. Here I am placing it over top, figuring out where I want it, and then I will take this handy tool and go ahead and scrape this down, press this down. I have the scissors here. I'm just cutting around so that when I go to place it on here, because it's on a curved surface, it'll adhere better to the jewelry box. So now all you do is you take this handy tool and you just keep rubbing this transfer down until it sticks to the box. You can lift it up, lift the plastic up every once in a while to make sure that everything has transferred down. So after the transfer has transferred, I'm going to go over the top and the bottom and the sides with my fingers to make sure everything is smoothed down pretty good. And then I'll take a piece of this plastic transfer, I guess you would call it, and just kind of burnish it to make sure that everything is set. So there's the finished box. I think it turned out pretty cute. A great way to take a jewelry box that you might have at home or one that you find at the thrift store and spruce it up and make it look pretty. You can also just paint it with your own design if you are so talented. For my next DIY gift giving idea, I am going to make belt cuff bracelets out of old belts that I picked up at Salvation Army. This is a box of my stash of old costume jewelry and other pins and things that I use on occasion for different projects. So here I am going through it. One of these days I will organize this box a little better, but it is fun going through to see what I have. I did pick up a couple of other embellishments from Michael's. So like I said, the belts came from Salvation Army, so I got a couple of different sizes and colors that I'm going to use. And the one I'm going to show you today, I'm going to use this belt here, and it's going to have a turtle design on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is determine what part of the belt that I want to use. I did not want to use the end part with the holes in them, but I did want to make it large enough to save it for later if I wanted to use that part of it. And then I'm just going to have to try and figure out, this is going to be for my niece who has smaller wrists, so I'm just trying to gauge how long I should keep this belt, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it. So I'm going to use the part from the original belt, the end of it that has kind of a curve on it, and I'm going to take my Sharpie and trace that curve so that I can cut it out and give it a little bit more of a design instead of just being straight cut. So after I trace what I want on both sides or on both ends, I'm going to just go ahead and trim that up. And as you can see in the video on the top part, I did make a couple of cuff bracelets with the black belts up on top. One of them I have a clamp on because I put some beads on it. The first one I did turned out okay, not as great as I wanted, but I had glued some beads on there, so I have it clamped down so that they can dry. And the other one, I just have a piece of jewelry that I picked out of my box and put on there also. So now what I'm doing is just spraying the ends with water, and going to go ahead and rub that on this cutting board, and that'll kind of give it the same color as the rest of the belt of the leather, and you know, keep it from looking like dried out or whatever. And then I'm just trimming off a little bit here, and I'll go ahead and I'll burnish that again with some water. And here I'm using the leather punch by Art Minds. I picked that up at Michael's. It's really not that expensive. It's about $10. And you can change the size of the hole. It's like on a wheel, so you can change the size of the hole that you want. So I go ahead and punch holes on both sides. I did end up putting 2 snaps on one end of it, just so that you can make it tighter if you want. So then you go ahead and you put in the snaps, and that is also by Art Minds. It's a snap and setter kit that you can get, and they have each package has different size snaps that you can use. So you basically need 4 pieces for each bracelet, so 2 for each side, and they are a little bit different. I don't know the technical terms for each piece, but you can, I actually just watched another YouTube video to try and figure out how to do this, and my first one I know was with trial and error, but and then I'll go back and look at what I had done and what pieces I needed to use so that I was using the right pieces. So this is the turtle embellishment that I got. I believe it's specifically made for bracelets. I picked this up at Michael's. It was actually on sale. They had a bunch of them on sale for like $2 or $3. So it's always a good idea to look at their clearance section. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out where I want it on here. And there are 2 holes, one on each end of this. And I'm going to mark it with the Sharpie. And then I'm going to take the leather punch with the smallest punch and go ahead and punch those marks. And then I have this leather that I picked up. It's like a leather, I guess, string that's also in the leather section at Michael's. And I'm going to basically just tie it on. I put it on a needle and pull it up and just tie a knot on each side. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the E6000 glue and just dab it in the knots so that they stay together and won't unravel. So this bracelet is actually for my niece, who is a marine biologist down in Alabama, and her favorite marine life to work with are turtles and dolphins. So here's a closer look at some of the leather cuff bracelets that I made. There's a turtle one, there's one with a saying on it. Those are the 2 embellishments that I got from Michael's. For my next project, I picked up this piece of artwork at Salvation Army. It did have a metal piece on the front of it that had a saying on it, and I went ahead and tore it apart and spray painted it black. The center of it has some kind of a fabric, it's kind of fabric, like a meshy, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and use my, my white paint as a chalky finish by Valspar that I use on a lot of my projects. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a couple of coats and let it dry. because I'm going to make this like a tray with like a little riser, I'm going to take these large beads and go ahead and use my folk art antiquing wax to color for these beads so that I can put them on the bottom. The transfer that I'm using is the IOD Figgy Pudding transfer of the Christmas tree. I'm going to go ahead and take out the pieces on this transfer that I don't want and place it on the tray and make sure that it all fits, and then I'll peel off the top plastic portion of it, get the handy dandy little tool and go ahead and scrape it down. So if you're wondering where I get my IOD products from, they have stamps and molds and transfers and other things. I picked mine up at Sweet and Sassy Treasures, which is in Shelby Township, Michigan. You do have to buy IOD products from, I believe they call them stockists, and you can find them online. Sweet and Sassy Treasures will ship to you, so you can order from her website if you're interested. And there might be others that are nearby you if you wanted to go in the store and find them. Just do a Google search. IOD might have it on their website for you to go check out who their stockists are. So again, I'm going to go in with the Folk Art Antique Wax. I'm starting on the bottom because I really wasn't sure if I would like how this turned out. But I do like it. I go ahead and paint it on, and then I have a paper towel to wipe it off. And it's called antiquing wax for a reason. Gives it an antique look, old-fashioned look, vintage look, which goes well with this Christmas tree. So I'm going to go ahead and do the whole thing. I also go ahead and do the mesh part, which goes on a little odd. It's not like real smooth, but I think it turned out pretty good. So the one thing about this tray is that you obviously don't have to use a Christmas design. You can use any kind of a springtime design or flowers or whatever you want to use, so that you can use it year-round. IOD has a lot of different transfers that you can use, and so there's many different ideas that you could probably come up with to make this a year-round piece that someone that you gift it to can use anytime. After I'm finished with the antiquing wax, I do go over the whole thing with the sealing wax to go ahead and give it a good finish so that it'll keep it protected. And there's the final product. It's a nice little Christmas piece to have that you can put things on, use it as a tray. I actually have some candles on it in my kitchen. For this next project, I'm actually going to make a dog bed for my little dog. I went ahead and sprayed this box that I picked up at Salvation Army, spray painted it black, and I took the handle off. And then I'm going to go over it with the sander and sand it a little bit to bring up some of this brown. And this was inspired by Yvette from Ginger Chick Rehab. She had done something similar for a tray. So this is the transfer stencil, not transfer stencil, it's a stencil. So I went ahead and cut it off on my Cameo 4. And having a little bit of hard time here peeling it off. Ends up peeling off. The paper on the back ends up peeling off on my my mat, which is no big deal. I just scraped it all off. Yeah, so this mat's pretty sticky. The bottom half doesn't stick or rip, which is good because that's the part I want to keep that I didn't use. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this half off, and it's going to have the stencil part of it on the top, and I have to go through, and this is like really sticky stencil. This is my first time using it, so I have to go through and poke the letters through so that I have the stencil part of it. So I finally have all the letters punched through, and I'm going to go ahead and center this. I did use my ruler a little bit. I used more of the eyeball method. And what it says Miss T Crate Company. Miss T is the name of my little dog that this bed is for. And I go ahead, I'm going to use the Valspar Chalky Finish paint to stencil this on. This is my first time stenciling, and I don't know if it was the little stenciling tool or sponge that I used, but it made the paint kind of bubble. Maybe I didn't wait long enough for it to dry. I think in hindsight I would have gone over it a little bit with a regular paintbrush, but it was kind of bubbly, and I don't know why. If you know, let me know in the comments of what I should do next time I try stenciling. The other thing that I messed up when I was cutting out the stencil was the E, the A, and the O. I didn't do that properly, and so they came out in the middle, but I was able to stick those back in, and then after they dry, I will peel them off. For the cushion of the dog bed, I'm going to use this drop cloth, and here I am taping down a couple pieces of cardboard that are pretty sturdy, but I glued 2 of them together to make it a little bit more sturdy. And I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and stamp it. The IOD stamp that I am using is out of their Queen Bee collection, which makes sense because Miss T is the little queen bee of the house. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange the stamps how I want them and kind of see how they fit on the cushion. Find the center of the cushion and go ahead and line up these stamps. Ink them up, I guess. This black ink. I'm just going to do the center part first, and then I'll do the outside second. So I'm going to gently press down on the stamp, trying not to move it too much, and then go ahead and gently lift off. And I'm going to take out the center stamps and do the side stamps. So now I'm trying to figure out how much fluff I want to use. And I think I figured like 4 inches would be good. So I go ahead and cut this off and put the cardboard that I'm going to use on the bottom. I'll put on top of the fluff, and then I'm going to wrap the drop cloth around and just hot glue it down. Nothing fancy. It's going to go in this box, and it won't need to be a perfect fit, but just enough to touch the edges. For the feet of the dog bed, I'm using these feet that you see on the left-hand side here. They were longer. I cut them in half so I can use the white ones that are going to be used for another project, and the other ones, the one that I have in my hand, is going to be used for the dog bed. So I just mixed some of the folk art antiquing wax with water. I'm going to go ahead and brush it on and wipe it off to give it that antique look. And if you'll see on the riser feet or whatever, there's like a pin sticking out. It's not even a screw, it's like a pin. And I didn't want to have to deal with putting holes in the box and figuring all that out. So I ended up just getting a hammer and putting it on the floor and hammering those pins down. So now what I'm going to do is take some sandpaper and rough this up a little bit, and the stenciling, and then I will wipe it off and again use the antiquing wax to make it blend a little bit better with the box. Once I'm done with the antiquing wax, I will go over it with the Valspar sealing wax. I will go over the outside of the box to give it a little bit more protection. So here is the final product. Miss T is definitely the queen bee of the house, and she does go in the bed occasionally. I have a picture coming up of her lying in the bed. She's a 14-year-old Yorkie poo. For my next project, I picked this box up at Michael's in their fall collection, so it was 70% off. I'm going to go ahead and use the Valspar chalky finish paint to paint the whole thing, give it a couple of coats, let it dry in between. So the tissue paper that I'm using is from Redesign, and it's called Chloe. And I do believe I purchased it off Amazon. This is my first time using this tissue paper, and it's pretty easy once I can get it out of this thing. You just go ahead and figure out your size that you want. Determine there's 2 sheets that have different designs on them, and I picked one out and sized it for the inside of the box and cut it out. And then you just take Mod Podge, put it on the bottom, and put your tissue paper on top, and then you go ahead and Mod Podge on top of it. When trying to measure it for in the box, I ended up just like creasing it with my fingernail on the top part of it, and then I take it out and I'll get my ruler and X-Acto knife and go ahead and trim that up. The nice thing about this redesigned tissue paper is that if you need to, you can pick it up and readjust it. It's kind of like a meshy, thicker material than a regular tissue. Tissue would just rip. So it has some strength to it, so it will not rip. So I am using the IOD mold lock and key to make a keyhole, to cast a keyhole, I guess you would say, to put on the front of this box. I'm calling it my French box. So you go ahead and get your air dry clay and roll it out, get it a little soft in your hands, place it in the mold, and then I have a handy dandy little tool after I've pushed it down as much as I can with my fingers, and I make it flat. I just scrape off the excess and make it flat, and then I will take it out of the mold and use Tite Bond glue and go ahead and glue it on the front while it is still wet, I guess you would say. It's not like wet, but and then leave it on there overnight to dry. And then I will go in with my white chalk paint and paint over it. So these are the feet that I'm going to use. You saw those in an earlier video, and I painted those white. And then I have the black ink that I'm going to go and put some antiquing on it, I guess, to make it look a little bit weathered. And I'm going to go ahead and do that to the edges of the box also, and to the keyhole on front to help bring out some of the texture, I guess you would say, of the keyhole that I made. So this is a nice little gift you can make for somebody to keep in their entryway for a catch-all or anything else. And I hope you enjoyed the video today. Make sure to subscribe and like and comment below which one is your favorite. Have a DIY day.